Good evening, everybody. Thank you to be together with us. I am very pleased to be here with Julia Smith from ESSEC Knowledge, who will facilitate the discussion with me. So many thanks, Julia, to be here. We have been preparing as well with Florian Philippe. I thank him as well. And this is a second masterclass we propose together. Other colleagues do propose other masterclasses. This one is the first in English. So we don't know exactly who will be here, but wherever you are, feel welcome. And you may have a look to the video afterwards because it will be recorded. So if it's not time for you because you are far away and with jet lag, you can have a look to it afterwards. So thank you to be here. As you may know, you may have noticed the title is Making Connections in a post-COVID-19 world. What is at stake with such a title is, first, we try and we want to look to the future, despite the circumstances. Second, we want to help people in tackling the crisis and overcoming it. And connection is crucial. And I will tell you to what extent, but this is the topic. We got used not to connect that much, even if we are so often on the social networks, and this is kind of a social network. We communicate, or we believe we communicate, but in reality, maybe we do not connect that much. And I will tell you what I mean with this. Now, a few preliminary remarks before going into the topic. The first one is about the future precisely. We don't know what the future is made of. And this is fundamental to keep in mind because many people, when they say, I am optimist, they may look a bit naive. And many people, when they say, and particularly in France maybe, but maybe in many other countries, when they say, I am pessimistic, it's a real problem because when people are pessimistic, they will provoke pessimism. My point is here, when you really admit that you cannot know about the future because our nowadays behavior and decisions contribute to shaping the future. So nobody can know in advance about the future. We just can try to guess it. But the best attitude is, let's do our best to, for instance, and particularly nowadays, to overcome the crisis. Let's do our best. And this is the only thing to have in mind. We may drop the notions of optimism or pessimism. Just do it. Just let's do it. So this is the first point. Second, about the past. Many people say this crisis nowadays is very close to the crash in 1929. Maybe it's possible, of course. And many people have the right tools maybe to analyze the past. But if we don't know about the future, I would like to make clear with everybody here as well that we don't know about the present. The present is so complex. And it cannot be reduced to a simple analysis, particularly copied from what happened in the past. So let's be very prudent. Maybe we need to drop our tools, to drop our instruments, and to invent new ones to understand what is happening now. So about the future, we don't know. About the past, okay, we need sometimes to compare, but it's not enough. So what happens at present, you and I? We may say that we are the crisis to a certain extent because at the sanitary level, at minimum, we are the ones who provoke the contamination through our movements. That's why the lockdowns have been decided. And second, when there is a sanitary crisis, quite often there is as well, of course, a human crisis, which becomes an economic crisis, a social crisis, a cultural crisis, a political crisis. And our responsibility is to dampen the crisis, to do all we can to dampen it and not to deepen it. And now I come to the core to my proposal this evening. Why connections? Because we may hear so many times that people think that humans are only bad. People think that humans are bad wolves for humans, and that life is only about struggle, competition against the others. And my point here is we should get rid of this assumption, which is radically a preconception. I don't mean that we humans are kind. We may be bad, but we certainly are not only bad. Just observe that when people say, oh, humans are bad, most of the time is about regretting it. If we regret that humans are bad, there is something good in us. We want humans to be good. Being bad is a lack of connection. Betting that we can build a future world together is reconnecting. Overcoming the preconception, the prejudice that we are only wolves for each other. Last remark for this introduction. When people believe something and they repeat something, they will progressively, unconsciously believe that what they say is true. As a consequence, humans have been repeating, I will tell you why, so many times that humans are bad, and they believe it. And this becomes true because in our behavior, we don't trust the others. The other word for not connecting is not trusting the others. In our world, we do not trust the others, even if we say we do, even if we claim for diversity, etc. Very often, unconsciously, in our attitudes, in our behavior, in practice, we don't trust each other. And this is radically problematic. So my objective is to give you some material to overcome these preconceptions. And I will tell you why it's a preconception. I will first give you an example. An example I very recently discussed in a course I gave online, of course, in Singapore. I was in France, but I gave the course in Singapore with excellent students. If they have a look to the video, congratulations again. And one of the cases, the discussed cases we had is a case of a company. So I will tell you about this very briefly. And it is related to trust and to CSR. Second, I will come explicitly to the CSR issue with some key points, which may be of some interest, to dig more into the question of connecting, collaborating, trusting people, having a look to the whole picture, taking care of people, not being only profit-oriented, short-term oriented, etc. Second part. Third, I will propose to trace back this attitude, this belief of ours, to its origin, and to my opinion, and I think it's not only an opinion, it's to be traced back to certain aspects of the birth of the modern political sciences, which are to be traced back to the philosopher Thomas Hobbes. And I will tell you briefly some points on his intention, which was very good. He was a humanist, but the effects of his intention on the long term are not that positive. They are ambivalent, and on many elements, they are negative. I tell you just now why, because he was the one who stated explicitly that we are but wolves for each other. We humans are only people who fight against each other. I will tell you the context. Last, not least, comparing the Hobbes' intention to the so-called ancient political philosophy. Hobbes was aware enough of his radical decision to make clear that he was the first in starting the genuine political sciences. And he was right, because he created the so-called modern political sciences. And doing so, he separated our taken for granted of politics, or let's say understanding of politics, from one which we can call ancient. So I will contrast the Hobbes intention and its effects to some elements of the ancient political philosophy. And I will propose some pragmatic elements, pragmatic methods to contribute to help us to overcome the crisis. And the crisis is made a lot by our assumption that we cannot connect with people because we cannot trust them. I hope I am clear with these points. An illustration, some elements on CSR, tracing back the problem to Hobbes and then to ancient political philosophy, and some solutions. So first, the illustration. I was giving class on ethics and CSR precisely in Singapore, and one of the participants gave the example of his company, which is suffering the crisis, like so many companies. And he's wasting a lot of money, and he was questioning himself about how to change the contracts he had with his clients, his suppliers, his employees. And among all these questions, he had another. He invented a device which helped him in, which may help, people to prevent contamination. And he started selling it. And he did not anticipate, but his device has a huge success. So he sells a lot. And then he got a question. As my product is so good, shall I increase the price? Shall I make profit of this advantage to impose higher price? This would be good for my short-term necessary, wealth, my sustainability on the short term. And he decided not to do for two reasons. First, heart reasons. He did not want to impose people to pay more for something very efficient to prevent contamination. First. Second, a long-term interest, because he thought, if I impose higher prices, I will make people have a sentiment that I am very short-term oriented and maybe selfish, profit-making company, not taking into account the whole context and people needs. And to the contrary, if they see that I don't change my price, but the product is sold very well, they will trust me. And maybe I will get new clients because they will observe that during the crisis, I behave taking into account the real future and people, the whole picture and the others. What is striking and very interesting and very, very right, by the way, is that during the discussion of the case, some people said, but this is not realistic because we know all that people are not that good and they will not remember that they can trust the company, etc. And here I am with something very important. Of course, people are not only good. So the people who said this is not realistic partially were right, of course. We are not angels, but we are not devils. We are in between. And my point here is, if we assume that people are not good, we will, of course, continuously provoke that people do not connect with each other, do not trust with each other, and do not count on the others. And we will provoke a vicious circle, which will continue deepen more and more, and people will progressively more and more separate and do not have the courage to relate again. So we need to bet that we can do something together. And this is what this guy decided, selling his product, not increasing dramatically the price, nor at all, by the way. So I hope the illustration is clear enough. I was about to continue, but maybe Julia will tell me some questions if there are. So can you tell me, Julia, if there are already some questions maybe or reactions?
Yeah, so we have a question about what the device is, like what the product was that he was contemplating in that example.
Okay, of course, the question is very relevant, but I cannot tell you because it was a discussion in class. And I don't want to give that many details that you could identify the situation because I did not ask if I could publicly give all the information. So I'm sorry about that. So far it's confidential. If you send the question, by the way, if we can keep it, I can ask And if I have the possibility to tell you, I will, of course. By the way, this would be in the interest of the guy because he would sell even more maybe. But so far, I prefer to keep it confidential because I did not take time to ask if I could tell. So sorry about this. But this is, ethics.
Yes, very important. We also have a question about what is CSR, and someone already explained that it's corporate social responsibility, but maybe it would be helpful to give a bit of detail on how that applies in the current crisis.
Thank you very much for this question, and this is precisely what I want to do now, to give more details on CSR. And it is corporate social responsibility. Are there some other questions, Julia, or shall I continue?
That's it for now.
Okay, so let's go. Thank you for the questions, by the way, already. For those of you who react and ask questions, I will check again if I can make public the device and the concerned company, and try to make it known. But now let's shift to the second step. So first I had the illustration, now precisely about CSR. The notion is of course, the abbreviation of corporate social responsibility. And about that, I'd like to make this observation. For 3 or 4 decades, the whole world has been short-term oriented. Why and to what extent, and what does it mean? This is due first to the fall of the Soviet Union and the communist regimes in 1989. What happened then? We had a monopoly of a unique way how to consider the economy. And this unique way is ours so far until the crisis. The capitalistic regime and the liberalism, the neoliberalism, and neoliberal understanding of economics. This neoliberal understanding is particularly rooted and represented by the economist, Nobel Prize economist Milton Friedman, who is very famous, particularly because he published in 1970 a very famous article in the New York Times, which title was "The Social Responsibility of Business is to Increase its Profit." This was the title. And the argument became progressively, not that progressively by the way, but radically, it's better to say radically, the unique social responsibility of business is to increase its profit. This was September 13, 1970. Why is this article so important? Friedman stated in the article that if companies do not care about their profit, they will not be able to recruit people. They will not be able to invest in research and development. Consequently, they will not contribute to the global welfare. And he was right. If a company does not make any profit, we all know the company will go bankrupt. So companies need to make profit. But the problem is that this was supposed to be the unique social responsibility of business and companies. The consequence is the emergence of a theory which is unilaterally oriented towards the owners of the companies. Who are the owners of the companies? The shareholders. And the assumption is that companies only owe money to whom? To the shareholders. And here is the problem, because the shareholders are not that long-term oriented. The shareholders, of course, there are some nuance, but globally speaking, they want money just now. They want to make profit now. And as we say in economic theory, to maximize the profit. So they will do all what they can to get their money back from the companies. And the companies became progressively more and more short-term oriented, profit-oriented, to the point that I can tell you, I gave many courses since this period, by the way. People progressively integrated that companies are only made to make profit. And this is the only objective they have. And they do not have an objective which is broader and considering the whole picture. Before going further, I need to insist on one point which is very important. Economists, liberal economists, want to separate economy from politics, due precisely to the communist regimes and to the communist failure. And they want to separate clearly the public sphere, which the states are responsible for, and the private one. And this is why they insist that economy should be totally separated from politics and from all the, let's say, public interest or common good questions. I am overdoing a bit the argument, but this is one of the bases of the theory. And to a certain extent, they are right, of course, because companies are not made to manage people as states. But three more points, sorry. First, many problems happened. Pollution, industrial catastrophes, companies going bankrupt, unemployment, due to short-term orientation. Second, many companies nowadays are much more powerful than many states. So at least these two elements provoked that a new trend in corporate social responsibility emerged progressively, which insists not only on the shareholders, but on all the stakeholders of the companies. In other words, the suppliers, the clients, the employees, the states precisely, the public governments, the environment, the nature. All these are stakeholders. And this new trend of so-called corporate social responsibility insists on this. The unique CSR is not to increase the profit. It is to deliver good products. It is to pay attention to employees. It is to have fair relations with the suppliers. It is not to provoke pollution. It is to respect the authority and the public rules, etc., etc. In other words, considering business in society, whereas the first trend consists in considering business kind of out of society, nowhere. But business is never out of society. It's always embedded in a society with people living, suffering, enjoying, etc. So we cannot separate totally economics and politics. And here are we nowadays, unfortunately, with the crisis imposing even more this understanding. And of course, the climate crisis provoking the same, let's say, the same awakening. We suddenly become aware of all these problems, making steps back and looking at the whole picture again. So being much more long-term oriented. Last not least, the liberal economy assumes that people are the economic agents. I will come to this in the next point, are but free, equal to each other, and rational individuals. I would just like to make a point here. We are not born equal to each other. We are not born free. We are not born rational. We are not born as individuals. We need to become all this. And when many people try to defend themselves against the liberal assumption, most of the time is not because they are not in favor of liberalism, but they want to get the means to become equal to the others, really free, rational, which may mean educated, and real individuals, grown-ups. So we need to keep this in mind. We need to give people the means to become free, equal to each other, and rational individuals. So these were the points on CSR. We have been short-term oriented with this first perspective on CSR, the shareholder approach, because of the monopoly of the capitalistic world, grounded on the liberal approach of business, which is exemplified particularly by the Milton Friedman statement, the unique social responsibility of business is to increase its profit, which makes sense as long as you withdraw the word unique. One of the social responsibilities of business is to increase its profit. It's only one of them among others. And profit making should not be an objective. It is for the shareholders. But for all the other stakeholders, it's a means. It's not an objective. So let's keep this in mind, and maybe let's shift to the next step. But before, Julia, maybe I can ask you if there are new questions or reactions, because there was one on CSR, so I hope I was clear enough on this.
We have a few questions. So the first one is, after COVID-19, do you think we're in for an altruistic or a selfish world?
Oh, excuse me, I think I did not get the question.
So after the coronavirus crisis, do you think that the world will be more altruistic or more selfish?
Remember about optimism or pessimism.
Very true.
I cannot tell you. I don't have any idea. But we all need, and this is my present effort, we need to try to do our best for this world to become more generous, connected, responsible, long-term oriented. This is common sense. So we need to do so, but we cannot know. So I don't know, but I try to. So let's go to the next question. But thank you.
So the next question is, have you noticed, or can you comment on whether trust will be reset with this crisis, and it will come back between individuals if individuals notice that the other person is adhering to new social norms like wearing a mask and maintaining social distancing?
So the same. I will give more details in the next step. But the same. We need to try to reconnect with an attitude which is grounded on trust again. But I will tell you how and what I have in mind with this. So I will dig more into this. So maybe we postpone the detail of my reaction to this.
Sounds good. And then our last question for this round is, so China is becoming increasingly dominant, and they make it very hard to take the politics out of the economic side. They always mix political and economic. So what are your thoughts on their global strategy?
So this has to do to geopolitics, because when it comes to China nowadays and the power this country is getting more and more, it comes from the global situation. And I am not competent enough to react on this question. What I can just say is that if we, Western countries, are scared, we'll never react the right way. So the most important reply I can give just now is, let's continue trying to make the conditions that China becomes really a partner. And I know so many people who work with China and not against, and who are not submitted to China and the Chinese power. So my main point would be, let's not be scared, and let's continue and doing our best for the best conditions we can. This may look formal, but I will again come back again to the attitude on this. So I propose to continue the next steps. 2 more steps, if you remember, tracing back the assumption that humans are not good to the origin, which is, well, the close origin, let's say, which is the birth of modern political science, and then contrasting it with ancient political philosophy and just identifying kind of solutions or attitudes to help us. Why Thomas Hobbes? Again, because he is the one who made popular the statement that we humans are but wolves to humans. We only fight against each other. And if there is a life, states he, it's only a life made of struggle for life, only fights, competition. Why did he do this? I don't go into the detail, but just to tell you, he made an assumption of a supposedly pre-political state of nature, And in this pre-political state of nature, humans are supposed to be precisely like the future economic agents. In this pre-political state, humans are supposed to be individuals who are all equal to each other, who are free and rational. And second, states Hobbes, as the resources are always scarce and that humans do not have all the resources they want contrasted to their desires and their needs, they will fight against each other to appropriate the resources for themselves. And he says that in this natural state, people have the right to defend themselves to the point they can kill the others. And he concludes, this state of nature is a state of a universal war, kind of a civil war, a universal global civil war. This is very comparable to our nowadays existence. But, well, the reason why Hobbes makes this assumption, which is theoretical, I will come back to this, is because he wants to impose the notion of social contract. And I don't give the detail of this, but he says these humans want a better life than constantly struggling for life. So they will create the social contract. In other words, they will create a political life with states. This is the argument by Hobbes. But what happened in the history? For many reasons, and particularly recently, and particularly since the fall of the Berlin Wall, we nowadays, in our culture, in our background, unconscious background, spontaneous, we keep in mind that we are but individuals who struggle against each other. We keep in mind this, let's say, natural state of life, despite we have states, despite we have a political life, we keep in mind that we are only wolves for each other, bad people for each other, dangers for each other. And this is a huge problem because people have this in mind as an evidence. And this may be in China, in Singapore, in Argentina, in France, in Africa, maybe a bit less, in Asia, in Europe. So it's in the US, it's a real problem. People don't trust people. And when people say, no, we can trust, they say, oh, you are naive, idealistic. They are right if we just contrast and try to say, oh, we are good. One philosopher said humans were good at the origin, the philosopher Rousseau, but it's another thing. And I am not claiming that we are good. I am claiming that we never are only bad. You may observe that when people say, oh, humans are bad, they regret it again. So they would like people to be good. So now let's go a bit more deeper into this. 5 points. 5 points. First, the Hobbes assumption is only theoretical. And he is aware of this. He's not naive about his intention and his heuristics, the theory he shapes and creates. He's very clear on this. This is an assumption. Consequently, he himself never observed a human state of nature. He was just inspired by a very radical civil war, which was the Cromwell moment in England when he lived, and the fight against the king and the parliament. And he was so scared himself, by the way. So he said, well, we are nearly like in this kind of natural state. But he never observed. So he makes an hypothesis, which is theoretical. So first observation, when people say that when we believe that we can trust each other, it's idealistic, they should know, and I would like you to know, that what is idealistic or theoretical is to say that people are only bad. This is a theory. And this is a theory which was created during the 17th century. Before, people did not think that way. They were much more subtle. They knew that people, humans can be right and wrong, bad and good, etc. Much more subtle. Whereas the modern people believe we are only bad, full stop. This is abstract. It's idealistic. It's wrong. Second, there is a reduction of humans to economic agents. When we assume that we are bad, free, equal to each other, and rational individuals, this means that economy is the only sphere we know and we enjoy. The notion of rationality is modern as well, which means calculation. And how much do we calculate nowadays? But let's remember, we not only are economic agents, we are as well artists, we are philosophers, we are scientists, we are believers, we have emotions, we are parents, we are children, we are teenagers, we are women, we are men, we are all of this, not only economic agents. So it's a reduction. Third, when we dig more into the economic theory, we may learn that the economic theory assumes that the economic agents are endowed by what is called a pure and perfect rationality. This has to do with something very problematic. And it's not only a problem within the economic theory, it's a general problem. We are nowadays looking for perfection. In other words, we implicitly believe we are gods. I can tell you I'm perfect. No, that's wrong. Nobody's perfect. But we expect people to be perfect. And this is a problem because you may notice that when people believe and expect that people be perfect, they will not forgive, never, any error, any failure, any hesitation, any problem. People will want perfection just now. And this, again, is short-term orientation. Because on the short term, think of this. We all want that people deliver the maximum immediately, constantly, and on a visible way. We want people to be perfect. And if they don't, we will separate from them. We will not connect anymore. Consequently, the desire for perfection and the assumption of perfection only provokes disconnections, accusations, resentment. So we need to forget about that. Next point, the so-called economic agents are supposed to be with nobody. They are nobody. And let's now go to the etymology of nobody without any body. They are disincarnated. And we may observe that this is understandable through the very definition. If you approach people as humans who are free, equal to each other, and rational, you don't know whether you're talking to a man or a woman, to a black guy, a white guy, etc., to a children or a grown-up. So you don't know. So it's forgetting about our condition. And we all have a body. We may put this even more radical. We are bodies as well. I will come back to this. Last not least, if we really are individuals who are equal to each other and free and rational and fight against the others, we don't trust each other. So these are the 5 shortcomings of the modern political sciences. They are rooted on these assumptions. Theory, reduction to economy. Third, perfection, being without any body, and fighting against each other. Am I clear enough so far? Do you have any question, or shall I continue and contrast it to the ancient approach of humanity and political life? Julia, do you think there are some questions?
Yes, we do have a question. So the question is that it's a lot to be optimistic and have hope when so often people's behavior is still selfish. So how can we avoid an individualistic society?
Okay, so I will come to this. So my answer is in the future, in the very close future. So I just now postpone it.
Okay, perfect.
No more question. I shall continue.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's keep in mind this. Having a look at the whole picture again, Thomas Hobbes made a real revolution in our way how to think. And the positive aspect of his revolution is the following, which is crucial. You'll see it's very, very positive. Then I will come back to the limits, the 5 limits I just identified. The positive aspect is that the very second you assume that humans are free and equal to each other individuals, I do not add rational. This is not the most important point here. You assume that equality is possible. You assume that freedom is possible. And these two categories are at the core of any political liberalism, liberal politics. And it's related, deeply related to democracy. So it's radically positive. We need them. Added to this, if you consider the gender studies, and if you consider, for instance, the fight against racism, you may observe that if you do not approach people on the basis of their sexes or their ethnical origins, even of their ages, but I will come back to this. Let's consider the sexes and the ethnical origins. If you don't approach people on this basis, you will just approach people, as human beings, full stop, and you will respect them. So if you get rid of gender, of ethnical origin, etc., you will respect people. You will understand the search of the modern political philosophy, which is a search of each individual universal recognition. The search of each individual universal recognition by the others. This is a radically positive aspect of this modern politics. So we need to keep this in mind and in the heart. But we need to observe it frontally contrasts the mistrust against each other. So we need to dig a bit more into this. I hope I am clear with this. This was the positive aspect of Hobbes' theory. Now, let's remember just this. When Hobbes creates his political science, he is very aware that he invents something radically new, and he states, I am the first political philosopher. That's not true. But this means I do not consider the ancient political philosophy as serious enough. What is the main point on which he disapproves, he opposes to the ancient political philosophy is the following. Ancient political philosophers used to say, humans are but political animals. I am using an expression by the Greek philosopher Aristotle, but this was a collective statement. Humans spontaneously, in other words, live connected. Because being political animals means that we live in families, in clans, in villages, in cities, in communities, in states, nations, in the whole world with the others. The ancient approach of humans is grounded on considering that we are spontaneously oriented towards the others, due to the very simple fact that we are born. And being born means coming from other humans, independently of the parents' sexes. But we need parents and we need a mother, so far, technically speaking, let's say, as long as we don't get rid of women to reproduce, which is the dream of many people nowadays. But in the ancient understanding, we are related, at least to our parents. But we are related to the others, connected. Second, being born, we need education. And here are we with a point where the ancient philosophy understands very well something we are forgetting about. If you assume that people are immediately equal to each other, you will never keep in mind clearly that you need to educate them. In other words, to help them, giving them the tools to become equal to you. In other words, the assumption of equality, of an immediate equality, progressively endangers this very common sense observation that humans need long period of incubation, which is called education, to become mature and grown up, to become adults. We are not born adult with all the means of the adults. We need to acquire them. Education is a help for the young babies, for them to become really able to have grown-ups lives with the others in the future. So for the ancient attitude, education is crucial. Whereas when you assume and you make a confusion between an equality which should become real and the assumption that people are immediately equal to each other, remember I mentioned it before, if you make a confusion, you forget about education and help. Last point, the ancient philosophers, they knew very well that humans are not that good. But they made a decision not to make it that clear, not to provoke the self-realizing prophecies we are now in. The very important philosopher Machiavelli decided to make clear that humans are not that good. And he insisted so much. Again, like Hobbes, for positive reasons. He was a humanist as well. But he insisted that humans, princes, should be liars, etc., to keep power when they get it, for the sake of stability. But doing so, and we all became Machiavellic or Machiavellian, he provoked a spontaneous sentiment that we are only bad. So Machiavelli contributes, together with Hobbes, to this implicit assumption, oh, we are only fighting against each other and wolves against each other. And we need to get rid of this preconception. And let's keep in mind that the ancient philosophers decided not to make it that clear, not to provoke the self-prophecy, the self-realizing prophecy. So now I think I may propose some kind of methods to try to favor that we really reconnect to each other, that we really trust again each other. And of course, but it will particularly be grounded on this simple observation. We are born from people and we always are embedded in collective life. So we are not individuals. We may become individuals and we may become, by the way, individualistic. But this is not the unique understanding of humans. And what I would like to contribute is that we got rid of this unilateral preconception. Humans are bad economic agents, etc., etc. So before proposing the kind of takeaways, let's maybe have a brief discussion if there are some questions. And I, meantime, check the schedule.
Yes, so we have a question. It is if education tools to shape and model human behavior can be acquired to the extent that they change our inner core behaviors.
I'm sorry, Julia, I think I didn't get the question. My apologies.
So, if I'm understanding the question correctly, and feel free to jump in and correct me on the chat if not, but the question is that can people be educated to an extent that it changes their inner behaviors? So I think it's can education change our sort of innate behaviors?
Okay, this is a very important question. Just to know, are there other questions or shall we limit to this one? Some others? Okay, so I reply to this very briefly. It is very interesting because education amounts to integrating norms. And I think it is interesting to observe the following. When you learn something and you learn how to do something, you will first listen to the rules, or you will be told some rules. For instance, when you start learning how to drive a car, you will learn the code. This is the theory. But in order to behave, conform to the code, which is at stake in the question, you need to practice. And the more you practice, the more the code will be integrated in your whole body, by the way. And you may observe that you may know that you know how to drive when you do not need anymore to think of it, because thanks to practice and experience and repetition, you incorporated the code, which became a series of reflexes. They will not be any more reflection, conscious reflection, but they will invade all your whole body. In other words, we embody the rules. And this is what happens with education. Education consists in integrating what we are told by the grown-ups, and on the basis of a daily repetition, we progressively become the rules that we learn. And this is, by the way, a basis of revolt by people, because they don't want sometimes to be conditioned by their education, and they want sometimes to make a step back and to question what they learned. And this is always possible. Humans can always question what they learned. But the learning process and dynamic is a process through which we become the rules we are told. And this is true even for professional competencies. We would need to dig more into this, but I am a bit afraid that we be too late after. So I hope this reaction is enough material. Maybe one more question. I would like Julia then to give some feedbacks and then have a last brief discussion, maybe.
Sounds great. So the other question is wondering if our society lacks spirituality and if technology has become a sort of religion for us and technological progress has become a main priority and main, in other words, purpose of humanity.
I would like to make a very brief point on this. Would technology become a new God? The technology would have helped us sooner against the coronavirus crisis.
Yeah.
So we need not to trust technologies. We need to trust humans. We are the ones who built the technologies. We are responsible for the technologies and not the contrary. We are invaded by a wrong understanding of technologies for many reasons, but we attribute too many qualities and far beyond what technologies really can do. Many books are now being published by very serious scientists against fiction about technologies. I propose to continue, and then we have a last discussion. The takeaways I would like to tell you are the following. The first one is, keep in mind that we are born connected. We are not born separated. In this perspective, we have connection in ourselves. So we are not the so-called free, equal, and rational individuals. And we certainly do not only fight against each other. We know how to help each other, how to love each other, how to have friends as well. I am not naively saying, oh, we are only good. That's not the point. We are as well good and connected, as much as we may become selfish and disconnected. We may be long-term oriented as well as we are short-term oriented. So remember about this. The consequence is we need to trust each other. If we don't, we will certainly fail, collapse. And don't worry, nature will be stronger than us. If somebody disappears, this will be called the mankind. But the world will continue, at least for kind of millions of years. So let's keep this in mind. Let's trust again each other and try to provoke a virtuous circle. Now, the next ones. Keep in mind that this assumption by Hobbes that we are individuals who are free, equal, and rational is theoretical. So keep in mind that the so-called idealistic understanding of humans as bad, the idealistic approach is that we are only bad. The realistic is that we may be bad and we may be wrong. We may be good. We may be both of them. Let's reconnect with subtlety nuance and recognition that we are able of many, many attitudes. This should be favored by pragmatism. Let's listen on real-time people, try to communicate with them, and try to understand their point of view and to really connect with them. Second, we are certainly never only economic agents. We are, again, remember, believers, philosophers, scientists, artists, etc. So let's make room again to other objectives. The economic world is not an end, it's a means. Economy is made to give food, goods, drugs, etc., to keep health, and all these is a means for something more, something else. We are not only consumers. We don't consume music, we listen to it, for instance. So we are far more than only economic agents. Third, let's forget about perfection. Perfection is very dangerous. There was a philosopher, a French one, who used to say, humans are not angels and they are not beasts. But the problem is that when they want to become angels, they become beasts. Blaise Pascal. This means never try to reach perfection. You will not be able. The ancients knew this very well. We are not gods. But trust trials, trial and error, step by step, small wins, like the great scholar Carl Weick would have said. So let's keep this in mind. Continuous effort, trying step by step. Next, we do not only have bodies that we can manipulate and change as we want, we are bodies. We are somewhere. If we assume that our body has not any value, we may think that we may be everywhere, but believing that we may be everywhere, like in the global context, we are nowhere. So we need to ground our action here and now on the basis of the bodies we are. We do not only have bodies, we are bodies with emotions, with memory, with desires, with perception, which means the whole time, memory is the past, desires are future oriented, and the perception is at present. We are our whole time. Let's consider it here and now. Last not least, back to trust. Let's assume that we may trust people, not in a naive way, but let's try it. I think with all these, we can favor collectively, with small actions, maybe huge results. In complexity theories, we know that very small actions, this is the butterfly effect, we may provoke huge changes. Let's trust again each other and we'll get it and contribute back to the crisis, not to deepen it, but to dampen it and to make it the less worse we can. Okay, I'm done. Maybe a couple of last questions. We are already a bit late. So Julia, up to you.
Okay, so one question is, what do you expect from the field of philosophy after the crisis?
What? Sorry, I'm sorry. What?
What do you expect from the field of philosophy after the crisis?
Again, I don't know about the future. I can tell you a point. My opinion is that we need to dig radically more into gender because it is at the root of any relationship. Women and any kind of people who wants to claim his or her or any sexual orientation are right. We need to respect it. But if liberation becomes, let's say, a bit radically, of course, Me Too is crucial. But if all this becomes kind of a revenge, we will only provoke revenge. And we will deepen the crossed accusations and fights and violence. In a very, very important moment of his book, The Republic, the philosopher Plato makes very clear on a discussion on justice that if you punish people because they are unjust, you will only intensify their wrong behaviors, their wrongdoings. we need to try to overcome together the wrongdoings. Let's be clear, all the males are not rapers, etc. So we need to together, male and female, work against any violence, any abuse, etc. We need to do this together. So my point of view is that the coming philosophy should take as a main topic gender, humans' relationships, starting with how to understand anew sexes, genders, etc. I think it's crucial. So this would be my answer, but it is mine. I'm not guessing what it will become in the future. I only tell you my opinion. It's only an opinion. Let's continue. Continue if we have time, and let's say 1 or 2 questions, and then we will stop it.
Sounds good. So another question is that education today is very much based on our modern capitalist society. So how do we expect future generations to change their behaviors if we're not able to give them the right vision for a different kind of positive future?
The good news is that it is already ongoing. The coming generations are individualistic, etc., etc., but on the same time, they are much more preoccupied by a life which would make sense. As far as I know, I give classes a lot to young people, and they are much more preoccupied by, for instance, the climate crisis, the notion of a stakeholder CSR, taking into account the environment, the balance between the private life and the professional life. They don't want anymore to work in a company for the sake of company and profit making. They want a balance. So it's ongoing. It's not that we need to change. It's already ongoing. That's a good news. We need to listen to the coming generations. This is not demagogy. It's really taking care of what is changing.
Yeah, it changes now.
Yeah, exactly.
And that ties into the next question, which is, do you think that the current capitalism model needs to collapse before we can build a new healthcare model as a global society?
I would say it already collapsed, but I would say as well, no, we don't need, we should work not to need catastrophes or destructions to construct. So we need to make room to our creativity. Let's take into account we are not only economic agents. Consequently, we are not only consumers. Consequently, we are not only predators. We are as well creators, artists with such a deep imagination. We need to make room to our imagination. Again, I was reading this afternoon a paper of a friend of mine who says that imagination is prevented from being free because of too many images, too many superficial connections. And I think he's right. And maybe the lockdown favors that sometimes we are bored, and being bored, we suddenly maybe contact much more ourselves. The connection we should do and favor is not only with the others, is with ourselves. And the connection with ourselves needs silence, needs pace, rhythm, moments when we are not superficially connected. In other words, too much connection damages the real connections. We need to relearn how not to be connected. We need some time to stop the computers. And I propose we do it in a couple of seconds, by the way. but I am very happy to be here with you. But so maybe because I did not put it in advance, maybe your last question and then we stop. Is that okay?
Yes.
If there is another question.
Yes, there's a couple actually. So one question goes back to the technology talk we were discussing earlier, and that is, what is the role of AI? So we had talked about how, it's us that are in charge of technology, but where does AI come into this?
I will not say more than I said previously, because the very notion of AI is not grounded. I would just like to tell you, can you imagine that we don't know about the human intelligence? We pretend we know the brain. We don't know nearly nothing. And we don't know the cerebellum as well, which is a crucial organ to understand our intelligence. So we don't even know about the human intelligence, and we cannot use the word intelligence for machines. Computers are not intelligent. They just calculate depending on what we want them to do. This does not mean that they can operate so many operations. It's fascinating. But let's not become too fascinated considering our creations. Let's not be paralyzed by what we are building. We are responsible for machines, not the contrary. Again, but have a look to many books which are published nowadays. Very interesting scientific books which make very clear the modesty and we should dampen our admiration of the machines. This is not the topic now, and I cannot go into more details just now, despite its crucial point. Okay, let's play a very last question, and then we stop it.
Okay, so very last question is, when it comes to interactions with people, what are the limits of trial and error? So, for example, people who have maybe some personality disorder or psychological problems, how does that impact trial and error and that kind of connection?
I will propose a provocative reaction to these. Let's be careful about our own psychological problems, and let's not believe that only the others have. But now I will be a bit more serious. We need to observe, and this is particularly the case when we believe we know people, we need to observe that we don't know ourselves. If we really are careful and attentive to ourselves, we have many reactions, we don't know where they come from. And remember the very famous Socratic statement, this very important philosopher in Greece who did not write anything, but he said, I don't know nothing. And he was very close to this other saying, know yourself. If this is an imperative, this means that in the real life, we don't know ourselves. How can we know the others? And here I propose another takeaway. When you meet people, and particularly when you have an idea about people, they have psychological biases, etc., make the assumption you don't know them. And you will make room to a real meeting. If you believe that you him or her again, you will not meet the people. You will meet the idea you have about the people. And you will repeat your illusions and your own sentiments. So please, make the assumption, the very sane assumption of ignorance, which does not amount to being satisfied with ignorance, but which amounts to saying, I don't know him or her. He or she is a real mystery to me. Let's discover it. And life may become really wonderful. This does not mean that a mystery only becomes wonderful. Sometimes we may have bad surprises again. But in the real life, if you make the assumption that you don't know, at least you will remain open-minded. You will listen much better the others, and you will learn so much more than if you believe you know them. And remember, worldwide, we believe we know that people are bad. We don't know each other. We do not know each other. We may make room to real inventions, collective ones, to overcome the crisis if we keep this clearly in mind and in the heart. So keep in mind the recommendations. I think they may be of some help. I don't know you. I don't know who was here. I'm very happy and pleased that there were people here and the questions. So many thanks for your questions and making this discussion very vivid. And Julia, many thanks for your help and for facilitating this. And again, to Florian as well for this organization. I'm very pleased to these discussions, even if they are virtual and that we cannot see each other easily, etc. But let's continue making this collective effort towards a real future. Thank you very much. Thank you, Julia, again as well. And have a very good evening. Enjoy the evening and the coming days. See you. Bye-bye. Very good luck and take care in these conditions. Bye-bye.